Vancouver Hockey Show, Andrew Wadden, producer Aaron, special edition this time around, Aaron, as we put a bow on the regular season and get ready for no, not the draft this time, baby. It's playoff time with the Canucks. Seems weird, doesn't it?
Hey.
Hey, yes, absolutely. It's wild to, think that it's been so long since playoff hockey has returned to Vancouver. And of course, they had the bubble before, but
the bubble.
Do we even really count that? And so, it's back. It's back, baby. And it starts on Sunday. So we figured we'd do a special edition of the pod just to get you set for the Nashville Predators. A little appetizer.
We're getting pumped up, so why don't you?
Yeah. Let's rewind the season just a little bit, though. I'll do our final rewind here. Canucks won their first division title since the 2012-13 year. So that's great. And of course, we talked about it was the first time that they've won the Pacific. So now they have a Pacific division title. They got a few of the Northwest ones and they got a Smythe ones as well. So there you go. Third time in franchise history, they won 50 or more games. And of course, the franchise record was the 2010-2011 season, 54 wins. Of course, they lost in the Cup that year. We all know that. The season after was the other time they scored or won 50. That is the 11-12 season. They lost in the first round to LA, who went on to win the Cup. Back-to-back seasons with 100 points from a Canucks score. Gotta like that. Miller, 103 points, seventh most in franchise history.
He was so good that he got to sit out the last game.
Yeah, exactly. Could have bumped himself up maybe a little bit there. Actually,
that's what Quinn Hughes was trying to do, right?
Well, and the head coach was asked about that. And he kind of went, well, I got to put out a lineup, right? You know what, too? He could have passed because 104, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, who knows? With a night, JT Miller, if he had himself a 4-point night, he would have tied for the third most amount of points in franchise. Anyway, it didn't happen, so who cares? But back-to-back seasons now, PD had 102 last year. Quinn Hughes, of course, leveling up every single season. So this is the third straight year now, Aaron, that he's broke his own single season points in a single season for a defenseman.
And DT pointed it out on the broadcast too, the all-time scoring too, of like how he's just going to leapfrog that first position in like no time.
It's funny when you pull up the Canucks like sort of all-time franchise records and whatnot and go to the single season for the defenseman. Like right now it's 1, 2, 3 for Hughes, at least on the top. I'm sure he sprinkled in there as well with the other seasons, but it's like when it's all said and done, is he going to have like 10? Right? So like the best 10 seasons as a defenseman. So he went from 68 points, then to 76, this year with 92. He ends the season with 75 assists. That's the second most in a single season. He tied though. Led all defensemen in scoring in the NHL, and he's going to win the Norris. If he doesn't win the Norris, it's robbery. Like we need to look into those voters and potentially maybe pull their vote next year. I know that Cale Makar is Cale Makar. We're going to talk about Roman Josi. Roman Josi did some incredible things. He always does. Big time point producer, but nobody had the season that Quinn Hughes had. Hand the man the Norris. Besser scored 40. Got to love that. First time since 2010-11 that the Canucks had a 40-goal score. They had 2 that year in Kessler and Danny.
And just thinking back to it, because we talk a lot about players. I don't think we've talked about Besser as much as we should have.
Yeah, it seems like the second half, maybe not as much.
Mm-hmm. But you know what I mean? Like we're always talking about Joshua, Garland, and then like there was the lack of points from Mikheyev, but then Miller's doing good. Hughes is doing good. Yeah. Sorry, Besser, that you were kind of the third wheel on the axle there, but but you had a great season. So
second half of the season though, Aaron, Connor Garland had just as many goals as Brock Besser.
Yeah.
Hit 15. Garland had 15 goals in the second half of the 41 games. So half of the season. Besser had 15 as well. So that's why we weren't talking about Besser as much, because his play took a dip really from the first half and the second half. He had 44 points in 41 games in the first half of the season. The second half of the season, he had 29 points in 40 games. And there's also that with Elias Pettersson. Elias Pettersson wasn't even a point a game player in the second half of the season, 36 points in 41 games. So good that you pointed those guys out, actually, because, that's something to circle here as they head into the playoffs. Like, is Petey going to find that next gear again? Is Besser going to be able to, be that big time goal scorer in the playoffs? So those are questions that are going to need to be answered, and we will get the answers to that pretty soon here.
And has Lindholm found it? Because you pointed out something pretty good to me last night with that game in Winnipeg.
What was that? I can't remember now.
And that screen, the double screen.
Oh, love that. Yeah. Yeah, the like staggered double screen. Lindholm is interesting because he played what? I got to dig it up here. I believe it was 26 games with the Canucks. Like the points are not there. Like he had 12 points in 26 games. And if you want to compare that, like Dakota Joshua had that many points in 23 games, like, so, but the thing is with Lindholm right now, it's almost like it's not like they've I don't think they've asked him to take a back seat offensively, but I think they've sort of asked him to sort of change his role a little bit and sort of dig into that defensive side of the game. I do like what we're seeing from Lindholm though, with Joshua and Garland. I think they're now starting to find that mix. That could be an X factor line in the playoffs.
Those are the three amigos right there, man.
Yeah, that could be an X factor line in the playoffs. We'll talk about that in just a moment, though. Let's finish up with the rewind here, though. Rick Tocchet. I mean, Coach of the Year. He's going to be a finalist for sure. But like, you talk about recency bias, so it's just kind of what we were just talking about there with Brock Besser, and the reason why we haven't been talking about him that much. But like, Tocchet, I don't know, let's say 2 months around the All-Star break, everybody, oh yeah, Tocchet is going to win the Jack Adams, 100%. But then as the season goes along, Knobloch in Edmonton starts to get brought up. And then you're thinking about, perhaps, Rick Bowness. I know that John Tortorella at one point was getting flirted with just with the things that the Flyers are doing that people just didn't expect. And there's a bunch of candidates. There is. But who's been the steady? It's been the Canucks and Rick Tocchet. I think Tocchet should win the Jack Adams Award. They've been the most consistent all year. But unfortunately, I think things like what the Oilers did is going to bump, Knobloch ahead of Tocchet. So we'll have to see here. But when you're talking about rewinding a regular season, that was a hell of a rewind for the Canucks. All right, let's dig into the playoff opponent here a little bit. I believe we have spoken about this particularly a few times on the pod because we were sort of sussing out exactly who the Canucks could face off. We do know this. The Canucks owned the season series against the Preds. Won all 3 games, but as mentioned, I believe on the last podcast.
Yeah, it was on the last pod.
It was 2023 was the year they last faced the Nashville Predators. They haven't faced
December
them.
December 19th was the last game.
That is correct. A 5-2 W. So let's go through a couple things we know. Nashville's one of the hottest teams in the NHL since the All-Star break. The 4th most amount of points in the league. Only Dallas had more points in the West. So they're the 2nd best team in the West since the All-Star break. They had the 2nd most goals per game in the league. Only the Leafs were higher. And the Leafs score a ton of goals. They allowed the 9th fewest amount of goals as well, did the Preds. So like they've changed. And they were sellers and buyers at the trade deadline. They got rid of Jakub Trenin, who would be a menace in the playoffs. He kind of has that sort of heavy game. They brought in Jason Zucker. But since they last met, the Canucks and Preds, there's been 50 games between them. So not since the All-Star break. Since December 19th, 50 games played by the Preds. Roman Josi racked up 58 points over that stretch, which is the most amongst defensemen in the NHL. Philip Forsberg scored 32 goals. The guy ended up with 48. So he set a new Preds record for goals in a season. Those guys are definitely 2 guys that the Canucks are going to have to try to contain in the series. But boy, what a turn of events for the Preds. When they last faced the Canucks, they were actually in the second wild card at that point, but their record wasn't nearly as good. Now they stayed essentially in the end in that same spot, but they leveled up, and as did those around them, really.
Well, because the Oilers were still way down at that point too.
Exactly.
So,
in fact, when I looked at it, the playoff teams were actually set then, just wasn't the Oilers. Arizona had that spot ahead of the Oilers at the time. And then the Oilers went and did their thing. And as we know, it's 16-game winning streak or whatever it was. So, but yeah, these Preds team, they've leveled up as well. So going to be real interesting to see what this series brings. That's going to bring us to the matchups then, because if you look at the forward group as a whole, I think the Canucks have the edge. They got more firepower. The Preds really are a one-line team. Now, the Preds are like a heavy team as well in terms of like, I think they led the league in hits. So they're going to they're going to be physical. But if the Canucks want to play that up tempo, that's going to be tough for the Preds as well. I know Andrew Burnett likes to play that game as well, the head coach of the Preds. So we'll see if I don't know if they want to play that game with the Canucks, actually. I don't know if they want to get into a track meet, because I don't think they can. Because when you match up the lines, the Canucks have the edge 100%. Like I said, you just got to shut down that top line, because that's where all the firepower comes from outside of Yossi on the back end, who I'll get to now.
Just try out skating Hughes for the whole
no
game.
doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. But on defense, though, Roman Josi, he could be a real X factor in this series. But he's really their only offensive threat on the blue line. Tyson Barrie plays for the Preds, but doesn't play for the Preds. He's been a healthy scratch a ton this year. I believe he only played in 41 games. It might have had something to do with injury. I don't know exactly what Tyson Barrie sees. I just know that he's had a tough year in Nashville. And I know that they were flirting with trading him at the deadline. But regardless, we might not even see him in game one. Been a healthy scratch. Didn't even play a game in April. So, offense from the blue line, it's essentially just one guy in Josi. And Ryan McDonough's a real good defender. I mean, I know Ryan McDonough's been getting up there in terms of age, but then this guy's won in the league before. Kind of maybe even a forgotten man there in Nashville. But Ryan McDonough, to me, is still a very solid defender. But I think the Canucks got more depth there. I really do.
Well, we talked about him earlier in the rewind, that third line.
No, but I'm talking about on defense. Well,
on defense, yeah, but I'm just saying up and down, there's slots with the Canucks everywhere.
In the forward group, 100%. Like 100%. The Preds do not match up well against the Canucks. It's the one line, really. But on defense, I still think the Canucks have them there as well. And as we've seen with the Canucks this year, like they've gone 8 solid on the blue line.
Tyler Myers has actually been really good.
Everybody's been good. What's funny too, though, is, would you say Phil Hronik's been bad? Because I don't think he's been bad, but his first half of the season is like night and day from his second half when you just want to talk about the offensive output. Like he was 34 points in 41 games in the first half of the season. So you can see why his camp was like, oh yeah, 8 million, baby. That's where it starts. And you look at the second half of the season and it's, where was he here? 14 points in 40 games. That's not all about offense with Phil Hronik. I get that as well, but he can be kind of loose in his own zone sometimes defensively. But I'll say it again. I think the Canucks, I think they got him on defense.
Out of all the guys, still like him paired with Hughes.
Yes. I agree with that. I think there was some worry earlier in the season that you were bulking up too much by putting them together. I think that worry's gone now. Especially with Carson Soucy being back when he was out for so long. He's just a real calming factor back there. You don't really say a lot about Carson Soucy, but that's a good thing, right? Stay at home, does his business. I like the Canucks defense over the Preds defense. So there you go. I'm giving them the edge on defense and in the forward group. This is the one that might be debatable because Thatcher Demko is top 5 in the league. Guess who else is in that top 5 in the league in goaltending? UC Saros. So I know UC didn't have the season that, in terms of his stats that jump off the page, and Thatcher Demko has been injured for a little while as well. So we'll see where exactly both goalies' games are at. But even through this stretch that Nashville went through, where they were one of the best teams in the league, Saros' numbers were just good. They didn't jump off the page like Josi and Forsberg. But you can see that Saros' his numbers, like, again, he was just steady. So in terms of goaltending, I think I'm still going to give the edge to the Canucks. So they got him in the forward group, they got him in the defensive group, and they got him in goaltending, I think. So, of course, Canucks got the edge. So, prediction time. What do you got, Aaron?
I think Canucks in 5.
Canucks in 5? We did put out a video on our TikTok, and we asked the people what they thought was getting a lot of Canucks in 5. I think the majority are saying in 6, and I'm going to go with the majority. I think Canucks in 6, just like they did back in 2011. If you remember that second round in Nashville. And was it, they lost that game 5, I remember, and it was just like, oh, they got to go back to Nashville. Because everyone just wanted to get it over with, right?
Mm-hmm.
They end up winning the game 6 there. And everybody knows
especially since like Nashville is just such a pain to get.
Well, that's
to.
the thing. Is it a 5-hour flight from Vancouver?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But everybody knows what Ryan Kessler did in 2011. Who's going to be that guy, you think, for the Canucks? Who's going to put the Canucks on their back offensively? Kessler was an absolute beast in that series. He was out of worldly, really. Is that how you say it? Out-of-worldly? Anyway, out of this world, put it that way. I'm going to go with Dakota Joshua being an X factor in this series. I think him and Connor Garland are going to be obviously continue to do what they have been doing all year. But that line, like that third line it's going to be a tough matchup for any team in the league to go that, like when you go Miller, Pettersson, Lindholm down the middle, there's very few teams that can contend with that. So I'm going to go with that, particularly that third line, but I'm going to pick out Dakota Joshua to be, I don't know if it's going to be necessarily Ryan Kessler of this series, because what Kessler did in that series was remarkable. You couldn't take your eyes off number 17 in that series. But I like what we've been seeing from Dakota Joshua down the stretch. I think he's going to be an X factor in that. But I'm very curious.
But then also Garland just getting in those easy areas, setting him up.
Yeah. If Joshua is going to have success, you know who's going to be the right-hand man, right? It's going to be Connor Garland. But I'm very curious, though, what we're going to get from Elias Pettersson. I shouldn't say I don't like the line that Pettersson's on, because like Hoaglander's done some great things and he had a very good year. I mean, 24 goals, right? But Mikheyev, he's basically been on a milk carton for a lot of the season. Where was Mikheyev in scoring in the second half of the season? Like way down there. Yeah, like he's not even in the top 10 in their scoring. So I'm wondering if PD's got the right sort of line mates for success. But that being said too, like, this is an $11 million player, or soon to be an $11 million a year player. Like he's, what is that, top 5 in the league in terms of salary? That could change over the offseason depending on who gets what. But like if you're getting paid like that, you got to carry a team, or you just got to carry your line.
Mm-hmm.
And
because to be honest, like,
have you seen it?
No offense to anybody else, I'm only seeing Hoaglander when that line's out there.
Right? Like when you watch, and if he's going to get paid like these guys, then you got to be able to visually see him like that. So when you watch McKinnon, McDavid, Matthews, who else is getting paid a ton like that? I mean, even Mitch Marner, maybe not as much John Tavares nowadays because getting a little bit longer in the tooth, but like those guys that I pointed out, like McKinnon, McDavid, Matthews, those guys, every time they're on the ice, can't keep your eyes
they're on the ice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't say that about PD at times. Now, he plays a different game than those guys. He does. He's not as predatory as, say, a McDavid or a McKinnon, and even Matthews as well. Matthews is defensively is a very good player. He's got that stick lift down, like on everybody. I don't know if I can say that about PD right now. So very interested to see what PD's going to bring to the table, and would love to just eat crow on this whole thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to see that.
Anytime there's something explosive going on, oh, look, it's Hoaglander.
Yeah, Hoagie just sticks his hog into the mix.
Yeah.
So you got the Canucks in 5. I've got the Canucks in 6. Well, we'll see how it all ends up as it starts on Sunday. And like I said, first time in 9 years since we've had playoff hockey here. Looking forward to it. Well, I'll be back again on Monday with another pod, and then we'll update you on there on what we're going to do. We'll do a few more here. Won't just be once a week. Pop in and out. Everybody else is popping into the post-game space. I used to live in that space, as you guys know. We're going to let those guys do their thing, but I got to give some props to our buddies, Donnie and Dolly, though, because they're going to go on TV and do a post-game show, which is fantastic, considering that's what we used to get back in the day when Donnie was on Sportsnet back in the day with Sportsnet Pacific. So glad to see that. But also, too, Cheech is in the mix with them. They just announced on Twitter that they're going to have Cheech. Yeah.
Say what?
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So we'll stay out of the post-game space, Aaron. We'll let those guys do their thing, but we'll come back a little more frequently and talk about how the Canucks are faring.
There's no space for us if Cheech is there.
No.
Because it's Cheech. I want to see Cheech.
They got the man there. So congrats to those guys. I'm looking forward to being able to watch that after every game, and looking forward to watching playoff hockey here once again.
Should we send a bouquet of ketchup packets to Donnie and Dolly's studio? Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. What the hell is with ketchup on pizza, by the way? It's already got a tomato sauce on it. Like,
I'm not a pizza dip guy at all. Like,
you're not a pizza dip guy?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh, marinara, like a nice little marinara with a little bit of ranch as well. Do that little mix. Woo!
No.
I'm not a blue cheese guy though. Can't do it.
You should get the sauce correct the first time on pizza. Like it should come as a complete package.
Well, what about the crust though? You need a little something on the crust, no?
No.
All right.
If the crust is good, you don't need to,
I hear you.
smother it in anything.
I hear you. All right. So there you have it. Canucks and Preds get started on Sunday. And now you know that producer Aaron doesn't like dipping his pizza. All right, guys. We'll be back. Stay tuned as we get set for the Canucks and the Preds. Thanks for listening, everyone.